Greetings. David McMillan, former narco-pest and Interpol also ran. Back with part 2 of Billion to One, even though I did say something about 150 million to one against, but this is still billion to one in a way. Why you are in your own golden age. Click to part 1 if you want to get up to speed, or sit still if you're past caring whether you're up to speed or not. Anyway, it's 2075 and you are blowing out that 100 candles on your cake. Incredibly, you have the breath for it. Machine intelligence runs the factories, designs newer fusion reactors, sending cheap electricity all over the world. No burning coal, combustion engines. The oil trade is out. Oh, great. Or belching livestock. All good, no pollution. Even the heat from so many more machines is sucked into space through the surrounding pipes of the 120-kilometre high magnetic launch towers. You're paid by the government, so you'll have money to pay for entertainment. As you turn 100 and in good health, you have the body of a 35-year-old. But you can choose to look any age you like. In fact, by the time we get to the stage where so many people are looking around that, they don't want to look 25, seems immature, but 35, yeah, well in control. The only people who look old are rebellious teenagers trying to shock their parents by looking like the Stones, Keith Richards or someone, using temp faces. Fortunately, as they grow up, they will choose to look younger. Before you would die at 120, extensions refined in the 2060s will take you to the age of 180, and before that age arrives, the 22nd century will produce medicine and techniques that allow healthy life until 300. Along the way, some of the rich will have moved into their cloned bodies. You have to be rich to have your body cloned. It's not the cloning process that will cost. It'll be expensive to keep the little girl or little boy clone a secret until it reaches 16, when you're ready to take possession of your new flesh. I imagine dogs on a Guadalajara rubbish dump eating the unwanted young brains for breakfast, as the rich settle into a 6-month rehab to train their 200-year-old minds to operate their cloned young bodies. You get it's no tissue rejection because it's a clone. Yes, but that will be a specialised market, and relatively short-lived. In fact, I doubt that an ethical option will happen. It makes good future scare stories, but the explosion of choice that comes with the machine intelligence age will be so great, most ethical dilemmas will be solved before any unbalanced implementation of life extensions. Yet, being human and sentiment and nostalgia will keep you as a flesh-covered electromechanical core for centuries, I suspect. But then, when you feel so attached to real skin as you reach your 500th year, try, when you're thinking about this, or am I talking too fast, what it'd be like to be 300 or 400. How will you feel about things of the flesh? Food. Your children's children's children won't demand their factory-grown muscle tissue food to imitate animals cut to pieces, as one generation did. They will see replica chops, steaks and bacon as wicked and bizarre. They won't understand you wanting to associate food with zoo pets, dead animals. I can't predict the colour, texture and taste of future food. Go through the lot, I think. That will be a fashion choice. But I suppose milk will remain white for 30 years or so after the last cow was born. Yes, no sense keeping a species, the cow, we created in the first place, that can't survive without human assistance. I've actually met people so stupid they think you can turn cows loose in the wild, well, where they came from. Sure. During wartime you could hear them bleating because they were unmilked. Besides, anti-pollution laws will see an end to those farting Franken critters. We are better off without the 8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent gas they add to the atmosphere. In fact, the current taste, or fashion again, for eating for your energy will face a challenge as bodies become more and more artificial. Some of you will live to answer the question, is the sensation of hunger worth keeping? Again, I don't want to stray into these inevitable technicalities of advancing civilization. I could happily spend all day doing it. But the point of this is about our moment in time, and more particularly your generation. Why it is so unique. Much of what you do will involve entertainment, just about does now. It is certain that you will create your own movies from a selection board. You will decide who stars in the film, what the plot outline is, and certainly include sections where you say, surprise me. The plot will be written by the machine, and the actors will be computer-generated to simulate those we like. Yet, how many of the stars of the future will be based on living people? Have you noticed how fame has changed in its level as well as its spread? A few decades ago, big Hollywood stars, some musicians and top sports players, they held near godlike places in the nation's minds. Sure, today famous people still get known, but they are not so special, as famous as they may be for however short a time, not so high up. Even major musicians and performers are rarely today stalked by groupies, screamed at on stage and adored in the same way. Their place is falling and will continue to drop. The age of the rock star, the screen goddess, the one-of-a-kind sportsman, and a few sportswomen, has passed. The days when a decade itself could define a national spirit has dissolved. We look and listen to, say, 1950s film and music, and the whole era flashes to mind. That's all we need to trigger it off, as do images of the 60s with their special flavour, and the 70s, the 80s even, for sure. There was novelty then. But in the decade before the turn of the century, the 1990s, defining the times by the look and sound became difficult. Sure, I'm not saying that many of us can say, oh, that was a 90s song, or that was a 90s film, but really, did the 90s have a particular standout theme to it? Could you, if you'd never seen the film or heard the music, could you say, yes, that's a 90s sound, that's a 90s film? Well, actually, I can. But on technical grounds, not on any other style. But it gets worse as the decades go on. Who can speak of the music and fashions of the first decade of the 2000s as one unique era? That time didn't even get a name. What's going on? Now, and all through the teens, style, music, fashion, and design all became mashups of earlier times. You have to be very young indeed to think something in music, art, architecture, fashion, food, and even design is new or revolutionary. When it comes to our most personal object, the one item that defines who we are, our cell phones, our mobiles, their design has flatlined. From 1980s bricks to the 90s miniatures, a little tiny thing, and flip phones through folding phones and bat phones that failed, The only place you'll see a thumb-sized phone is up the bum of a prisoner on A-Wing today. And you shouldn't be looking there. They've been flat bars for 10 years and they're going to stay that way. Those foldables will go the way of Google Glass. And I expect, as will the wand when it comes. It's kind of rod thing that'll fan out. But it won't hold. The so-called chocolate bar, the flat thing we have, will stay. Keep that design flatline in mind as we jump ahead to our future entertainments. When you look back on the human species from the age of 300 years old that you'll be, you will know you are lucky to be here at all. We're on a 4-billion-year-old planet that seemed to oddly have some kind of DNA on it, only a couple of 100 million years after cooling off that volcanic activity. I suspect the DNA must have come in our water, yes, from somewhere else. But it would have been dull DNA for sure. Because then 2 billion years of single-cell life before the most lucky stroke of all. A bit of mitochondria, another kind of grub, got stuck inside another cell and actually reproduced as one. It's not so easy to do in the lab. Anyway, making possible by that all today's complex life are all related. The mitochondria is like a battery pack, I suppose. But there's no use going on about being lucky with that, and lucky not to go extinct like the other 100 hominid branches that there must have been. That luck doesn't count. If it didn't happen, we wouldn't be talking about it all clever like we are. It did happen, and here we are. Even those advanced thinking machines that learn and solve problems and devise novel solutions were just about inevitable sometime after 1900. When those early sparks were lit, they were not likely to be extinguished, no matter what you think of the atomic age. Now, forget that kind of good fortune. Here's where you are lucky. You had some of the old days, you still have, lived with pain of flesh and bone in your first youth around 2000. But now, having had your body parts replaced 4 times, and the brain reflushed twice, and at 300 years old are tired with all that flesh when really touch-sensitive metals will do better, more convenient. In those years you had phases of engineered chimpanzee muscle to be 3 times as strong and spent too much on real flesh maintenance. It's quite expensive to keep up. So have gone for the full machine option. Besides, at your advanced years you're getting bored with regular entertainments. The pastimes simulations are better than movies, and of course they are a game in a way. You grew up with that. It is no surprise that most people choose the 150 years between 1850 and 2050 to go back to in their life simulations. You could go back further, but I don't think you'd stay there long. And I wonder, why wasn't there much human civilization older than 10,000 years ago if we're supposed to be 200,000 years old as a species? Some blame it on recurring ice ages, but was it all geography, climate, 2 species of grass, einkorn and emmer wheat, was it? Anyway, and an ox that put us on this road? In your 330th year, you have lost interest in surfing. That's tough. Driving on the few remaining test tracks, bungee jumping, space rides, or skydiving. Although you sky-hop the Grand Canyon in a suit and subsuit the Atlantic depths to chase synthetic gorgons, it's the simulations that get you in. And they're cheaper, of course. Cheaper than real stuff. Keep in mind the economics of all this, the economics of the future. If it's cost-effective, cost wins. That's how you can be sure whether your prediction is likely to be true, by the way. In your Sims, you've met Alexander the Great, vomited on ancient Roman fish paste. It was horrible. I think the Swedes do something similar now. Visited the boy king Tutankhamun, seen how ugly was Cleopatra. Ooh. I mean, she let her coins come out like that, you know what I mean? You might even want to see what kind of people crossed the Bering Strait to populate the Americas 20,000 years ago. Start a few arguments. But I think you could probably get that last one done in an afternoon. You want more than questions answered. You want to be able to live in those societies. If you lived, say, in Jerusalem in 610 and met the Prophet Muhammad as he passed through and came to an understanding of the Abrahamic religions in depth, where else could you go that would be astonishing? If that event was astonishing. You could be defending the walls of Constantinople in 1453. You'd be there a week tops. Click on to part 3 of Billion to One, or come back to see what your 500-year-old self will be doing with your time. Stay here.